Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Story number 1. I didn't do this for fame. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Written by Random 3X. Nick walked down the hallway towards the studio where his presence had been requested. Some historian or document diver had found his name on a few bits of paper, and he had been called to speak about what he had done. Honestly, though, he had no deep wish to draw attention to his actions. Walking through the double doors, the show's host rose and greeted him. Looking to his left, Nick could see the audience had already settled into their seats. "Thank you for coming today. I was hoping that we could dive right into this if you don't mind," the host said, gesturing to a comfy-looking chair across a coffee table from his. "I will begin with a short narrative of my guest's early life. He was born to a family of bankers and grew up in relative comfort." The host began with images of Nick's childhood appearing on the display. It was in his adult years that he and a close friend organized a skiing trip to Celeste Fall. The host continued. Nick could feel a knot start to form in his gut. It was in the build-up of this trip, his friend, who was already there, contacted him and told him to come soon and not to bother with the skis. The host explained as a new image of a young version of Nick in a suit was displayed. Wondering what was happening, Nick complied and arrived to find the planet in turmoil. The host paused for the words to sink in. There wasn't a human alive who wouldn't know what had caused the turmoil. When he arrived, he encountered a veritable sea of refugees. An image of refugee camps appeared. It is here that Nick found a new purpose, the host explained. This caused the knot in his stomach to tighten even more. He didn't do this because of a need for attention. "What is it that you saw there, sir?" The host turned to face him, wringing his wrinkled hands. He looked up. "Children," was the only word that he could muster to say. Precisely, hundreds of children who had fled the Stardom 5 system after being forced out by a militant dictatorship. It is here he began working tirelessly to save these children. Nick lowered his face into his hands when the host said this. He founded a new organization with the sole purpose of evacuating these children who were being abandoned by inefficient and aimless programs. Using their own funds and sleepless nights, you laid the groundwork to save them, didn't you? Nick nodded in response. You then returned to your home planet and began to set the groundwork for that side, finding foster families, preparing the steps necessary to receive them. The host brought up pictures of little haggard-looking Nick. But the cogs of government turn slowly, don't they? So, what did you do? The host asked. I forged the documents to give children access to the world, Nick confessed. Well, we commend you for this action, sir. It is only now, decades later, that these actions have begun to peek out to light. Your wife, who found the record you made, shared them with us, and we tried contacting some of the names on your list, the host explained. Victor Guntharian. He was 8 at the time of his rescue. His family died in the sweeping massacres that followed the invasion. When he asked him, he revealed that he had made efforts to find who had helped rescue him, but met no success. The host explained, gesturing to a man sitting in the front row of the audience. Would you please stand up? The host asked, to which the man complied and removed his hat. I just want to say thank you. Without you, I wouldn't have been alive today, the man said. Nick could feel his lip quiver with emotions as the warmth filled his very being. Next, we have Shala Vate. She was 11 when she was rescued. She is now a galactically renowned scientist. The woman rose from a seat. Sir, there aren't enough words in the common languages to convey how much my children, and my entire family can thank you, she said with a bow of her head before sitting back down. Nick could already feel the tears welling up in his eyes to see 2 of the children he had rescued had already made the entire effort worth it. In fact, we have reached out to all the names that we could locate and asked them to join us, if they could. Can anybody whom Nick helped rescue please stand? The host asked. Nick felt a semblance of his control over his emotions vanish as tears freely rolled down his face. Every single member of the audience had risen. Hundreds of children, now adults with lives and families of their very own. The full count of your efforts is truly unknown, in part because of lost records, in part because you did this all without fanfare, the host explained. It has been decades since you took steps to save their lives, but you, who should have been hailed a true hero, never stepped forward. May I ask why? The host asked, turning to Nick. I didn't do this for fame. I did it because it was the right thing to do. When you see children in peril and no one is doing anything to help, what more is there to consider? Nick answered. End of story. Story number 2. Humans are rats, snakes, and cockroaches. Written by Adoik.
Lord Ishka, can't we just trample the humans beneath our feet? Why must we avoid fighting them?
The elven officer, Lilia, shouted in anger, pounding his fist against the table of the coalition members sat around. The beastkin Ishka raised his hand, silently demanding Lilia be quiet. Captain Lilia, do you know why humans have dominated the world? He said in his low, growling voice, suited for a bear like him. Lilia raised an eyebrow, sitting back down, though he crossed his arms over his chest impatiently.
Because they breed like rats, and are as devious as snakes, and are as stubborn as cockroach.
Ishka simply shook his head and stood up, using his large, tree-branch-sized cane to aid him. He moved over to look out the window of the war room. Humans cherish the birth of a child, unlike the beastskin who give birth to litters, or elves who kill for their family, unlike us beastskin who obey a pack leader and don't see our families as our family, but as a part of a whole collective. You elves have your children, and then abandon them in your caregivers for 40 years. You see having children as necessary, and hold no love for them. Lilia sighed as he frowned at the bearkin.
Your point, Lord Ishka. They are still as devious as snakes and as stubborn as a cockroach.
This time the bearkin turned a cold stare towards the elf, letting out a growl. Devious, absolutely. Some humans are devious, but even the ones that are usually have a meaning behind it. They backstab you because they have a reason. They are unlike the dwarves who bicker and squabble, plotting and sabotaging their rival houses. The dwarves must be bribed to work with each other. Ishka kept speaking, walking around the table at his slow pace. Humans raise a single human village, and even their enemies will come and fight you. They have more loyalty to each other than any orc to a fellow orc, who wishes only to become the strongest. They'd happily strike me down and take control if they thought that they could win. But a human, they fight alongside anyone, so long as they simply feel an obligation, even if it is to a lord who doesn't know who they are. Unlike you elves, who would whimper and cry if their officer was anything other than an equal being. The bearkin said loudly, banging the bottom of his cane on the floor. The elf captain grew visibly angry, slamming his hand once more against the table.
They are as stubborn to kill as a cockroach. They always come back and can't be killed easily.
The bearkin let out a disappointed sigh and moved to behind the elf, his cane clacking against the floor. They lack physical toughness. They are not cockroaches. A human can be killed by almost anything. What they have is the will to survive. They fear death, and in that fear, they will fight tooth and nail to come back from death. He slammed the cane on the table and lowered his towering figure down to be at the ear of the elf. Tell a human he can't, and he will do it. Tell him it's impossible. He will bend the very will of the gods to his whim. to make it so," he growled softly before standing upright. "Our army is 100,000 strong. All of the humans capable of fighting, just the adult men who are soldiers, measured in the tens of thousands. The men who aren't soldiers, another few hundreds of thousands. If they become desperate, the teenage boys, another few hundred thousands. They will even field women if needed," Ishka said, throwing his cane to the opposite wall. "How can we possibly win? You knife-ears won't even fight if you're not soldiers. My orc soldiers will fight themselves if they get bored enough. My beastkin troops don't obey me, only their pack leaders." The bear had stopped speaking and was more just growling and shouting in an almost animalistic manner. "A human will let himself burn alive before letting someone harm his family or land. You have the willpower to throw yourself upon a spear just to let an ally get past it." The room was silent before the general spoke again. "We won't go to war with the humans. Instead, we shall focus our efforts on reclaiming demon lands. It is our only choice for expansion." The giant bearkin made his way back to his seat and sat down. Lilia remembered Ishka had been part of the beastkin raiding clan that attacked and pillaged a human farmstead. In retaliation, the human lord of that region purged Ishka's entire clan of adult men. They let the women and children go, burning into their minds the terror of a scorned human. The room filled with debate and discussion about a potential war with the demons, and Lilia kept quiet, contemplating the future of his race. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons: Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barkey, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian.